Alright, hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today we have my friend Oishik here on as a guest. So Oishik is a second year at Harvard Business School. It's winter break for both of us right now. I'm a first year at Wharton Business School. And so you are almost done with your MBA program.
A little worrying, but yes, almost done.
Yeah. How does that feel?
Good. I guess maybe the one thing that I'm a little nervous about is just like graduation is coming up pretty soon, and maybe sad that a lot of people who are in school right now might be leaving the Boston area after school to work at their jobs, and I really want to stay in Boston. But I also feel really grateful that like we've had an amazing year and a half so far.
Yeah, it's crazy how time flies in 2 years because I've only just finished my first semester, which is 25% of the program already. It's like, where did the time go? There's just so much going on all the time. And also, Oishik is here so that we can discuss the differences between Harvard Business School and Wharton. We'll go over a few questions that I prepared and then a few questions from you guys that you guys have submitted on my TikTok account, which is also at Irina_IRL. You should go follow it to stay up to date. So we can just kind of jump into the academics of Harvard. Harvard's known for their case study method. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And do you feel like it's a good way to learn?
Yeah, I'd say overall, to answer your second question first, it is a really good way to learn. I think that there is a level of discourse within the case study method and disagreement and like cross disciplinary talking that isn't maybe possible in other methods. So maybe just as a background for the case method, the case method is basically, I think it's most apparent in the first year. So at HBS, we have these 95 people sections. We have around 10 sections for around 1,000 students, which is like 1 year. And each section has 95 people from all across the world, from a variety of industrial backgrounds and just like general philosophy backgrounds. And we have these cases which are around, let's say, like 11 to 12 pages of a deep dive into a specific area. And these cases are generally meant as material for a class, as like a teaching exercise, as opposed to this is the right way that things should be done. And for example, like let's say someone might be like, okay, how do you have a case to teach finance? For example, you might have like let's say a Disney case on strategy, and that's pretty helpful. But we use these cases to teach like a specific concept that is important to us. So for example, if we were learning about like the cost of capital and discount rates, we might have a case where someone is like trying to consider some different options for loans, which might have different discount rates. And I think that like philosophy of, instead of the professor just teaching us material from like a lecture, PowerPoint, for example, we have this case where we get to actively discuss it, and the professor basically guides our discussion from person to person, maybe brings up some topics and then tries to either synthesize our information or bring up counter-opposing viewpoints. And especially given how easy it is to get information nowadays from LLMs and other places, I think the active disagreement and discussion is what makes the case study method so helpful. And like I'm doing an MS MBA program in engineering sciences, and I have some non-case-based classes, and I can definitely feel like the lack of engagement in the non-case-based classes, especially at like the graduate school level.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I agree with that for the most part. Wharton is not a case-based program. Harvard is like all case-based, right?
Almost all classes. There are some in the first year for sure, they're all case-based. We'll have some simulations in the first year, but the second year we have some classes that are more either simulation-based or sometimes a little bit more lecture-heavy if it's a very dense concept. But in general, most cases are case-based. Sorry, most classes are case-based.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you pointed out that your finance class was case-based, because I studied finance in undergrad and I worked in banking for the 4 years before Wharton. And I've never had a case-based discussion around finance. Like how I was taught finance was like, oh, here are the formulas, here's the intuition behind it, now go apply it. Which I think for me it works really well because I learn the best when I'm applying something. In my case-based classes, they happen in this first semester, my management/strategy class and my legal ethics class, which I think makes sense because they're very much more qualitative classes, and you can take a lot of the learnings in the cases and like extrapolate from that and like figure out how you can apply it to your own job or like your own company if you're building a startup. So I think it's really interesting that like Harvard has applied the case method to like a more quant heavy class essentially.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially like quant heavy classes. Like obviously it's a little different because you have to do the calculations yourself beforehand. But I think it's more of the assumptions we're making that become the point of the case. But yeah, it's interesting to hear how like Wharton has like a slightly different structure.
Yeah. I think just from my peers that are in the finance class, so I tested out because I worked in it for so long. But some of them struggle to understand certain concepts like a discount rate. And I think having that case to kind of tie in the concept to an actual real life scenario, that would have helped a lot. That's cool. So then on the topic of academics, does Harvard have a grade non-disclosure system?
Usually, yeah. Like for most people when they're applying for jobs, we don't really like give away our grades to these employers, but nor do they really ask for it. I think they recognize that the point of school is not about the grades per se. Like they want to see us engage with our educational system and like try to like learn during class. We obviously still have finals, and if you don't work hard, there are like disciplinary actions. But I think in general, people are pretty invested in their classes, and then obviously, particularly, it all costs a lot. And I think even more than the cost, there's a large opportunity cost of like not working in industry and continuing to move at the pace that your peers are moving at. So I think most people are pretty invested in their own education.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. We also have a grade non-disclosure system where it's like frowned upon really if you put your GPA on your resume, because we have this resume book that everybody in the school and employers can look at. And so we also have this Follies that happens in February, which is like a satirical musical based off the MBA experience by Wharton students about Wharton students. And one year, I think it was last year, the Follies writers, they went through the resume book and like they called out people who had their GPAs on it. It's like that's how taboo it is to have your GPA on your resume. Like obviously you can still put it, you know, like if you're in like the top whatever percent and you get like this scholarship, this recognition, of course like you can put that, that's great. But it's really funny how the different schools and all cultures are around academics and grades. Because also, in regards to the three spheres, like academics, recruiting, and social life, how would you say the vast majority of people at HBS ranks them?
That's interesting. You said recruiting, academics, and social life. It's interesting because I think there's a large overlap between these categories at HBS. So I'd say like one of the biggest overlaps might be recruiting / social, because there's lots of people who, okay, let's say like what are typical job functions that people exit to after business school? And there's a lot of people who are trying to go back into industry. There's some people who are trying to start their own companies or join startups. And I think what I see as like this really interesting blend between social and recruiting is that, for example, there's these clubs that are more pre-professionally oriented. So, for example, the healthcare club, the media and entertainment club, which I know you're part of. And these clubs make it so that generally you have people of the same interest background who are joining, and they're frequently interested in the same types of jobs. So you might be working together with them to, like, let's say in the consulting club, to case or practice for these sorts of roles. But in the process, I think you realize who is of the same interests as you and maybe long-term in industry who you might hang out with more. And I think as a result, for example, in the healthcare club for me, I'm like, oh, these are people that I know many years into my career. I hope to have them as my friend because I know they're interested in the same things that I am. So this is a great way for me to hang out with them in a social context through like healthcare club mixers or events. So I'd say that generally for most people, recruiting / social life generally places a pretty big factor. I think it's interesting because academics is still really important, but we have, I think, a much larger academic course load than some other business schools. And many people complain, but also many people are like, oh, this is a good way for me to get the knowledge that I came here to get. But I think outside of classes, and especially maybe after the first semester at HBS, the recruiting and social life / maybe I would consider this generally like some spectrum in between starts to become important for more people.
Oh, that's so interesting because Wharton's reputation is a party school. I didn't know that until after I had committed, which I'm like, wow, that's fantastic, you know? So I would say at Wharton, the first priority is recruiting, and then social life, and then recruiting and social life are interchangeable, you know, depending on which industry you're recruiting for, depending on like what semester you're in. And then academics, for the vast majority of people, are way down at the bottom. Like people will like skip classes if they have some like, recruiting event going on. And the professors, they understand. Most classes have a policy where you can skip 2 classes without any repercussion. They're just like free passes. So what I mean by the different, I guess, phases of recruiting depending on which industry, the banker, so the investment banking people, and the people recruiting for consulting, their recruiting timeline starts during Opportunity Week, which is 1 week in mid-October, and for the rest of us, it's like fall break, essentially. There's other companies from other industries like retail that come on campus too, but for the vast majority of the time, Op Week is for consulting and IB. And all of these firms will come on campus, and people recruiting for these industries, they need to stay on campus. They can't travel during this week because they need to go and meet the representatives from these firms. And what I will say about banking recruiting in particular for business school, it's so different than banking recruiting from undergrad. For undergrad, yes, we had to do coffee chats, but they weren't necessarily prerequisites. They were very helpful, but not required. They are required for business school, and they're called coffee chats, but they are interviews. Like, people get cut after each round of coffee chats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's almost like similar to consulting. Like, I saw like a pretty similar change in consulting as well. But were you taking these IB interviews as well this semester?
No, I'm not going back into banking, but I have plenty of friends that are going into or trying to go into banking or trying to go into consulting. Consulting at Wharton, consulting recruiting is a little bit more chill. Like they will also have rounds and rounds and rounds of coffee chats, but you don't get cut after each round. It's like they do all the coffee chats for consulting, and then at the very end, they give interview invites. But for banking, it's like there's a few rounds of coffee chats, like for the banks to get to know you and vice versa. And then once those initial rounds end, and like the real coffee chats begin, they're called like invite only, like coffee chats essentially. Yeah, if you're not invited to the next round, that's how you know that like you're not going to get that formal interview offer. This is just for interview offers, they're not for internship offers. Yeah. So that's, I would say consulting and IB recruiting are the most strenuous. I basically almost never saw any of my friends who were recruiting for investment banking.
Wow.
But the good part is that they'll find out their offers in January. And then for banking, if you get the internship offer, then the full-time job is yours to lose, not yours to earn. So you're basically guaranteed the full-time return offer. So they're going to be chilling for the next 75% of business school. People in other industries, especially media, media does not give return offers at all for summer interns. And then for tech, I mean, big tech does, but you know, some of the smaller startups, it just depends.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting that you guys have this 2-day policy. I guess to some extent we have maybe informally also some level of absences. But you're right that for us, like investment banking, consulting are typically like much more busy. But I think some of the recruiters recognize or try to place our interviews at off times because like if we miss class, the case-based method starts to break down. Like we have people who are missing from class and therefore can't contribute, and it's just it results in less viewpoints. So we have certain people still miss once in a while, but I think that our recruiting, I think as a result, becomes even more stressful for these students because they're trying to make these interviews outside of classes, like before or after class, and dealing with classwork initially. I think there's maybe maybe you will find this out next year how it is at Wharton, but for us, our second year has again a ramp up of academic rigor because everyone is interested generally in their second year classes, and that's when people are like, oh, I'll put more time into my classes. But I definitely think it's still a little different than first year where it felt like everyone was in the same bubble, so everyone is working so much harder because they know it's much easier to compare between people because we're all taking the same material.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. Yes, so I guess kind of going to that academic setting or structure, we also have a cohort system. So we have a class, each class is about 850 to 900 people, and each class is broken down to 4 clusters. And each cluster is broken down into 3 cohorts, and each cohort is about 70 to 80 people each. And so for the first semester, you're taking classes with the majority of your cohort. But not all classes will have everyone in your cohort in them because you can test out or waive out of certain core classes. So again, I waived out of finance because of my background. I also tested and waived out of accounting because I also took that class in undergrad. And so people can also test out of stats or the first quarter of econ and stuff like that. But for the most part, yes, we're taking the core classes with the majority of our classmates in the first semester. But because we can waive out, we can also start taking electives in the first semester too. And so I have noticed that for me too, that I put the most time in my chosen electives, even though they may be very time consuming, but I just was very much interested in those versus some of my core classes. Let's go all the way back. Tell us a little bit about your background. What were you doing before HBS?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Texas at Austin where I studied chemical engineering. And then I was also really into data science at the time. I knew that long term I didn't want to do traditional chemical engineering, so I was like, let me get some data science skills and then try to apply to an area that I think can make an impact, for example, biotech or healthcare. So I was working at this large tech company in Atlanta called NCR. I was in their innovation lab doing data science. So for example, my first couple of years, I was building a search engine from scratch. And then the last couple of years, I've been basically doing restaurant sales forecasting because restaurant managers have very little data to back up decisions behind scheduling employees or purchasing inventory. And on the side, I was working at this YC-backed biotech startup, both because I was interested in the work they were doing, but also as preparation for applying to the MS MBA program. And that work was really exciting for me because I was applying data science to the biotech industry, but also this was a company that spun out from a lab at Georgia Tech, and I needed long-term, this was something that I was also interested in, trying to transition technology from the lab to the market. So that's generally what I was doing prior to HBS, and then I was also playing a lot of tennis.
Going on from that, what were your goals at HBS? Were they related to your background?
Yeah, so I got really excited by the startup I was working at on the side, on evenings and nights, and or evenings and weekends. And I knew that long term I wanted to start some version of, at least I thought on my original essays, a data science company in the biotech and healthcare space. When I came to HBS, our MS MBA program had a large focus on technology, entrepreneurship, and leadership, leading tech ventures, or even within larger companies. But also recently there's been a focus on commercializing technology coming out of labs. And that to me was really exciting. So I knew that at least my goals at HBS were get exposed to not just entrepreneurship, but the specific flavor of tough technology and more tech entrepreneurship within commercializing technology. And my goal was get exposed to the area, start something at HBS, or at least be involved in starting something. And then depending on how it goes post HBS, either continue my own venture or join some other startup in the Boston area, which luckily is a great place for biotech and healthcare.
Exactly. You are in a prime location for that.
It's been fun.
Yeah. So then I guess specifically what resources does HBS provide that can help you figure out what you want to do?
Yeah, I think HBS has definitely changed in recent years. I think I heard from someone, and take this with a grain of salt, but I've heard that like Stanford, for example, was very tech entrepreneurship focused and has been slowly shifting to a little bit more of like a more general management mindset, like closer to Harvard. And then I think HBS has been slowly adding on more tech entrepreneurship and focus, or just entrepreneurship in general, I'd say as well. And some examples of resources that contribute to that focus, at least within the HBS community, the biggest one is the Rock Center, which is like our main center for entrepreneurship. They support us with like the Rock Summer Fellows, which is a summer fellowship where we get to work on our own startup. I think it's called something else, like they're doing a rebranding now. But that was a really useful way for you to learn about the general entrepreneurship ecosystem at HBS and your fellow founders. And then within the larger Harvard ecosystem, right on HBS campus, they have the Harvard Innovation Lab. And that's like a great way for collaborating with all of the different universities across the Harvard ecosystem. They have people from like the engineering school, which is luckily right across the street, the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and all of these different programs like the law school all come to the iLab to work on their startups. And I think these two are like two major resources. And then obviously there's typical things like we have our entrepreneurial management unit, like course unit at HBS, and the professors there are quite helpful. We have lots of competitions, like the new venture competition. But I think the main point is just like the students who are also involved in entrepreneurship generally have a good way of helping each other out within like the Rock community or the iLab community.
That's so interesting. So then, did you already have an idea of what you wanted your venture to be, or are you kind of utilizing these resources to figure out, what to pursue?
Yes. So one other resource that I had available to me was the MS MBA program itself and their administrators. And like one of my professors, for example, Tom Clay, had done this sort of commercializing technology before. So when I came in, I was like, oh wow, the sort of work you did is kind of like what I'm interested in. I definitely used, like I had a broad idea of what I wanted coming in, like some version of applying new technology, hopefully some level of machine learning or data science, or even just like creating a new form of data to that industry. But when I came to HBS, there were like these interesting seminars. For example, we had this Entrepreneurship in the Life Sciences seminar series where we were introduced to some concepts, but also some people, like concepts like IP, but also some people who had started companies in the space. So I think that started to give me a little bit more of a sense. And then luckily, because we're in the Boston ecosystem, there's these Boston / US specific accelerators. So for example, I met the professor in the lab that I'm working with through Nucleate, which is this life science accelerator in the Boston area. And they introduce you to a lot of, if you're a business student or from a business background, a lot of people who are doing PhDs or professors who have technology in labs that are trying to be commercialized. It could be like a biopharma, like a therapeutic, or it could be something like a tool. And I think like that gave me a better idea. But the professor I started working with was working on a technology that was so similar to the startup that I was helping before that I was like, oh, this is a great fit. So I kind of like had a sense of, I knew life science tools, analytical methods, like the tools that these life science companies use. But the specifics, I think I was hopeful that HBS would introduce me to the right ecosystem and people.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did you look up this professor before you went to HBS, or did you find
So the Nucleate organization had like a speed dating event where they introduced us to all of these professors, and he was just one of the people that happened to be there. But like I went with a group of HBS students, like we all Ubered over to one of the VC companies in the area, Pillar VC's big office building, and then they had the Nucleate was hosting the event there. So I think like these accelerators, the VC companies, the universities, they all have these collaborations and really trying to just like cross-pollinate these different people in the ecosystem.
Oh, that's fantastic. I am not currently looking to start a company, although I feel like that would be really cool in the long term. I just don't have an idea yet, but I know we also have our innovation center, and Wharton is traditionally known as being a finance-heavy school. But I agree. I think Wharton is also trying to invest more in both the entrepreneurship and the tech space. Yeah, so Wharton was like very much heavily traditionally a finance school. Lots of people went to Wharton to get into banking or to go into other like high finance jobs like private equity and hedge funds, etc. But recently, there's been a slow but steady shift of people who want to exit into banking slash consulting, shifting to they want to exit to tech. And so I think that has been very interesting and indicative of where like the general shift in the economy slash society is going.
And there's been some good companies that came from Wharton, like good startups recently, like what's the I-Class brand?
Warby Parker,
yeah.
Every single professor loves to bring up Warby Parker as an example.
Yeah. So they're like one of the flagship examples.
They are, yeah. Warby Parker, and in my innovation class, my professor also brought up diapers.com. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah. Weren't they bought by jet.com or either way? But yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, I think they were acquired, but yeah, diapers was interesting because they basically solved the issue of they're basically the Amazon for diapers. Yeah. And the way they were able to become so successful is that they made changes to their operational structure and like really utilize technology to help speed run their operations and the warehouses and all of that. So I think that was really interesting. I've never worked in retail before, but yeah, Warby Parker and diapers.com were some of the flagship names that came out of Wharton. I just feel like there's so much opportunity and so many resources that's almost overwhelming.
Yeah. Sometimes we have so many different advisors to talk to, or even people that they connect us to within the ecosystem, that outside of classes, sometimes it's a little hard to prioritize which one you want to spend more time on. And I think as a result, having some sort of focus, or even like, I think what was helpful for me was realizing what isn't of interest to me.
Yeah.
And it might be maybe a little presumptive that, hey, I won't go into an area. Like, for example, for me, digital health broadly was an area that I wasn't that interested in within the biotech and healthcare space. Or even like provider, payer, like that part of the industry. But I think it helps because then whenever you see anything related to that, you're like, great, I know that maybe academically it's of interest, but there's only so much time I have. Let me allot it to something I prefer.
Exactly. I definitely felt myself getting tugged in so many different directions within just the recruiting space. We're not even talking about the social space right now. But I was obviously very much interested in media, so I was going to everything related to media, which I had to because Wharton doesn't have an ecosystem that supports media as well as it does for finance or consulting. But then I was also interested in entrepreneurship, and Wharton brings in so many cool speakers. They brought over someone who was in venture capital. They brought in people from like different like CEOs of different companies. Like they brought in the CEO of Bobbi Brown. Like that was pretty cool. The makeup company. And then I'm like, okay, but you know, I worked in finance my entire career. Like I do enjoy finance as a topic. And so lately I've been thinking about, should I go into media investing? So there's so much resources for the entire investing world that I've just begun to dip my toes into. So I'm like, but again, where's the time? I guess I can stop sleeping. In terms of the HBS population, what's the percentage of people that want to start their own thing versus want to go into industry, and then within industry, which ones are the most prolific ones that HBS students go into?
Yeah, I'd say that the number of people who are interested in entrepreneurship is definitely increasing over time. Like, for example, our Rock Summer Fellows this past year had like around 150 students, which of the total 1,000 person HBS class is honestly like a pretty large percentage. I think that but we'll see how many people end up doing entrepreneurship right when we graduate. I expect it'll be significantly less, but I think that it at least gives people the exposure. And I heard some statistic which was like within 10 years or so, around 50% of HBS students will have started something of their own at some point within the 10 years, which to us I was like, oh, that's kind of like a crazy number. And this is historically, I think, for example, this coming year or this new first year students at HBS are much more entrepreneurially minded than even our class, which is kind of exciting to see. And then for the people who are recruiting, I definitely think by the time people graduate, the recruiting cycle does start to kick up a lot more, especially for certain industries where they don't do their recruiting like a year in advance, like investment banking. They might do it more just in time.
Yeah.
And I'd say the biggest industries are still like consulting by far, and then I generally say that like technology and like tech and investment banking are pretty close after. But I think increasingly there's a lot more people who are going into who had started to leave some of the more traditional consulting jobs and are going into more things like entrepreneurship and tech, or have left investment banking. Like I think 15, 20 years ago it was definitely very much more IB heavy, but I think it's changed, which I'm assuming is like pretty similar at Wharton.
Yes, the trend is very similar. It's like the exact same trend essentially. But there's a pie chart somewhere out. I'm pretty sure you can Google it. Still a great chunk of people at Wharton go directly into consulting or IB.
I would have guessed that Wharton would have a higher IB percentage than most colleges, but do you see this like as a result, like more recruiting events for them on campus relative to other industries?
I think it's a two-pronged answer. Yes, we do have a lot of recruiting events that support the IB industry, but also Wharton has been historically very strong in finance and banking and consulting. And it's like that's what Wharton is known for. And so people like self-select into Wharton to go recruit for these industries. One of the associates that I worked with at JP Morgan in investment banking, he came from Wharton and he was a recent grad. So when I was applying, I was, asking him about his experiences, and he told me, it's like I applied to Wharton for investment banking, and that's what I went to Wharton for. And he was very clear on his goals, and I have so many friends who are the same way.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, there's also the other contingency of people who want to go to other industries, or people who are a little bit more open-minded about wanting to like figure out what they want to do at work. But I feel like that's very difficult to do in business school in general, like using business school as a way to figure out what you want to do, because it's only 2 years. Right? I think, and so expensive. Like literally a single class, not like the class over the semester, but like a single 90-minute class, we did the math, and it cost $500.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had done some similar math on like each minute or each second, how much are you paying?
Exactly. So it's like not a good use of time, money, or resources to go to business school to like, quote unquote figure things out. It's a lot more effective and efficient if you go in having some sort of idea of what you want to do.
Yeah, or at least like certain areas to explore as opposed to a very broad opening. I guess I still think that there's like a value to exposure within business school of being exposed to a lot of different industries, but there are certain industries that I think require a little bit more foresight and planning. For example, IB, that I think it's harder to transition to as easily if you don't have complete confidence.
Oh yeah, 100%. Shall we get started on some of the spicy stuff?
Sure.
So the comments on my TikTok have been wanting to know a lot about the tea at business school. So I guess in generally, can we describe the social scene and culture at HBS? We talked about it very briefly, but can you like just dive deeply into it a little bit more?
Yeah, I think at least first year, the social scene stems a lot from the academic structure. Funnily enough, like your section is who you see most of the time. And because you see them so frequently during the class day, you kind of have like a general understanding of most people's general behaviorisms and viewpoints. But then I think when we, as a result, do these social activities after, and especially in the first 2 months at HBS, you host any sort of social event, and so many people will come within your section, and it's a little bit overwhelming. But I think that's a really unique way to meet so many people in such a short period of time. And the 1,000-person class is pretty intimidating, but at least if it's your section, it's a group of people that you can generally know the background and get to understand the like the behavior of each of the people in your class. And I just think that that's a really good way that we start. As the year progresses and you have things like the clubs where you have like maybe pre-professional clubs, certain clubs are just like just for the sake of interest. So for example, like I know there's this whiskey and spirits club and then like a wine and society.
Yeah.
The one that I was really interested in was like the tennis club. And these are great ways to meet people across your specific interest. And I think that like through all of these different ways, like you might know the people in your discussion group, and then it's like we have this Cape Cod trip that happens every Labor Day weekend, and that's like your house is another group of people that you get to know pretty well, and then you have your section, and then like whatever clubs you're involved in, like you have these different ways that you have connections to different people. And at least for me, what was really interesting was, for example, we have this thing at the end of the first year called Field, which is our capstone class, where we travel to a different country and we work on like a short week-long consulting style project with a different company in the country. I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil, for example, and I was meeting some people who were within my section and outside of my section. And when I would see, let's say, two people that I knew interacting together and they happened to have a much deeper friendship than even I had expected, or maybe closer than me, I would realize, oh, there's some other organization or club or something that they knew each other from. So I think like the tangled graph or like network of relationships within the community is like totally fed by all of these different types of interactions that happen.
100%. Yeah, I agree. I think Wharton does the same exactly to make meeting people more manageable, because 1,000 people, like 800, 900 people, it's very intimidating. And so it's a lot more manageable to meet people like in a 70%, a 70-person setting. That being said, though, our like big trip for first years, that's like a tradition, is that basically the entire first year Wharton class just uproots and transplants into Columbia, the country, not Columbia Business School. So Columbia, the country in South America, and maybe like 500 people. Wait, no, way more than that, because on the official trip there's 400 something people, and like good chunk of people also shadow the trip. So shadow means like they just basically follow the same itinerary, but they're not part of the official. They get their own Airbnbs and whatnot. Shadows are typically cheaper than officials, but that's all to say there are 400 people on the official. There's another few hundred people shadowing. So yeah, it was like the vast majority of the first years out in Columbia. So when I was on the official events, I would see people in the hotel and be like, who are you? Or we had a beach day where it's like everybody was there on the beach. I'm like, who are these people? It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's funny because I think Stanford does the same thing. They also go to Columbia right before school. We all go to Columbia at HBS in spring break.
But what other HBS travel traditions or traditions in general are there? I know you guys have Yacht Week, which is big.
Yeah. So I think we do Yacht Week across a number of business schools, but I wasn't able to go because of our MBA classes.
Oh, you didn't go?
I unfortunately didn't go. I had class. I had a friend who went and then in the middle of the trip, like left the trip, like to go boat on his own and came back and got very sick because obviously going from Yacht Week to classes, MSMBA classes is quite tough.
Yeah.
But generally Yacht Week is like a lot of different business schools, and I think this is a pretty common, generally type of trip in like the Croatia, Mediterranean area. We'll get onto these yachts and they will like all travel as a group and then connect at certain locations. I wasn't able to go, but I had a lot of friends who went and it was really fun for them. I had done some version of a boat trip because I was a 2+2 deferred MBA admit, so we did a small version in Lake Powell, Arizona a couple of years ago, which was some crazy stories from there.
Right, because didn't you tell me about a story about some boat, which I thought was Yacht Week, but obviously not, but some boat's restroom got clogged up?
Well, restrooms got clogged up, and I think more importantly, we just had too many people on one boat in Lake Powell, Arizona. And this was like our own 2+2, like we had self-organized a version of a trip. There was some students who had gotten earlier, but that was like both an exciting time as well as maybe a little logistically ambitious. But I think Yacht Week, as a result, I wasn't that interested in Yacht Week of like sitting in the sun, and I don't drink that much, so it was a little tough to be somewhere like that. I was more interested in these classes, but a lot of different schools will go over there, so it's a great way to meet people. And so that's like one major trip. I think another one is because we're in the New England area, Cape Cod and Labor Day weekend is another. Generally, we do these section retreats in the fall and the spring, and we usually go to some nondescript New England town in the area. And generally, I think in winter break, so we'll have these like smaller treks throughout the year. Some people will go to like Tanzania or Vietnam and places like that. And then I think the other big trip is in spring break, Colombia.
But Columbia's not every year, is it?
Colombia's every year.
It's every year for both first and second years?
Sorry. Just mainly first years. Some second years maybe go, but first years generally are the ones to go. Yeah, but it's first years, spring break. And then I think in the second year, it's much more like self-organized trips amongst your friends, but there's still some like slightly larger treks.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from second years at Wharton too, that there's less like whole class trips, mostly smaller group organized trips. Or we also do have official treks through clubs. So yeah, like my friends, they just came back from the Vietnam trek that was organized by the Southeast Asia Club. That one looked sick.
Yeah.
I had so much FOMO during winter break, just seeing everybody on their trips because I was supposed to go to Tanzania, but then I sold my Tanzania ticket for recruiting purposes, and also there's like situations going on in Tanzania right now, which like my parents are very risk averse, so they don't want me to go, which is fine because that means I'm going on the Florida trip with my family for New Year's. But then for us, we also have our ski club is huge, and so Euroski is a huge tradition for both first and second years. And that is at the end of January, right before we get back to school for the second semester. So I'm gonna go there. I'm so excited for that. And then US Ski is also a pretty like sizable trip.
Yeah, I think that especially that some of our ski trips are quite popular, especially because we're all in cold areas. Right
Yeah, that's crazy. Cause like, have you skied before like business school?
No, and I still haven't skied during business school, but the first time I went skiing was because of business school, because of the deferred MBA program. After the boat trip, we also did a ski trip, and that's when I skied for the first time.
Oh, fun! Yeah, because we're both from Texas. And it's one, hot, and two, flat. We're from Houston. So I never really skied growing up. But then, I moved to the Midwest for undergrad, and like people were mostly from Chicago or from like the Northeast area, so people skied there. I moved to San Francisco for work, and that was close to Tahoe, which has fantastic skiing. So like a bunch of people skied there. But it's like this whole culture, I feel like that I've suddenly been thrust into.
Yeah, it's definitely a culture of people who really, really enjoy the skiing and spend a lot of time doing it.
Yeah, I'm excited though.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Especially, I'm sure that like y'all will have a lot more ski trips in the spring.
Yeah, we do have a spring break in March, and there is spring ski. That one's going to be in Whistler, so that looks sick. But we also have a bunch of people going to Patagonia during the spring, and after Colombia, that was my first time in South America. I'm like, wow, I want to visit more countries in South America. Patagonia has always been on the bucket list. So I'm gonna try and get on a shadow Patagonia trip because the official Patagonia trip is with the Outdoors Club. It's also very popular, the Outdoors Club. They do these wild treks. So let's see, during fall break, my friends went to Kilimanjaro with the Outdoors Club. They hiked it, 7-day hike, or 6 or 7 day hike, and they summited. Fantastic. Outdoors Club is also planning a Patagonia trip for spring break. Outdoors Club, they also do a trek to Antarctica every 2 years, so that would be pretty sick.
Wow, every 2 years, so like I guess you'd either be a first or a second year.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's also 10K.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, what has been some of your favorite trips?
I'd say Field was honestly a really fun one because I think even though that's school sponsored and we are doing it as part of a class, I think there's a bit of an academic and work component, which is nice. And you're usually working with 4 people that you don't know at all to the field program. And I think it's a really good way to get to know people and work with people you might never have had any sort of industry relationship with. And then I think once you're in the field location, especially if you take advantage of the country and all of the different cultural activities, it's a really, at least for me, I had also never been to South America prior to going to Sao Paulo. And it was really exciting to see a new culture, and sure, maybe like living in Houston growing up, it felt like more similar to me than some other countries. But to me, that was a really fun trip. We also went to Rio de Janeiro afterwards, which was very beautiful. And that is probably like one of the better trips I've done. I haven't traveled as internationally as many people who have been in business school. But I'd say, yeah, that's like one big tradition. The section retreats are also another really nice time. Like, it's good to hang out in like a really nice, peaceful New England area with your section. Some people travel a little bit further their second year, but it's a pretty good tradition.
Well, one, I guess 2 follow-up questions. One, how did you choose your field location? And then 2, like, is your section still close now that you're in your second year?
It's tough. So to answer your second question first, it's tough your second year because you aren't taking classes with them, so you don't see them every day. I think it's more like if you see them in the hallway, you know that you have the shared connection, so it's relatively easy to like smile at them, or for a lot of people you might be even like marginally closer to, you just go and talk to them for a while, and especially since you have this shared background. We still do like maybe an event or 2 every 3 to 4 weeks, something like that.
Oh, that's every 3 to 4 weeks. That is like pretty impressive for business school time.
Like I think like some version of a happy hour or some event. Like we have like a cake cutting event. We had a lot of.
Yeah, and like you guys have classes on Friday, so really you only have like 3 evenings to do that per week.
Yes, generally, or I mean, we'll do events on like weekday evenings. But I think the thing is, most of these are more just like nice social events. For example, we had a lot of engagements happen recently, so we had a nice cake cutting event. And then to answer your first question, so I think yes, overall the section is close to it. Definitely not as close as first year, but there's still some level of bond. And then, what was your first question?
How do you choose your field project?
You don't choose your field project, but you do choose your field location, and they give it to you a list of locations, and then you just generally list like what is your tier 1, you really want this, a tier 2 moderately, and then tier 3 maybe you don't want to go. And then they try to match you, and they base it off of like demand and and they try to spread out the section, so they have like an algorithm that works underneath.
Oh, like, interesting. We have something similar. We have like GMCs and GIPs. They are also academics intermingled with traveling. For those, you have to apply to, so not everybody gets them. And it's like an additional cost. It's not baked into the cost of the program.
It's I guess we have a similar thing. IFC is like international field class or something. I think it's pretty similar. But these are like you opt in to take them.
Yeah, they usually happen during the breaks, like during fall break, winter break, spring break, and like at the beginning of summer.
Are you thinking of taking any?
I'm thinking of taking one. There are 2 that I'm interested in. One is like AI and emerging tech in China. And I think that's going to be cool because there's so much innovation going on there, and China's like one of the markets that I'm looking to expand into because I do want to work internationally too, or like be in a position where I can work internationally. And then the second one is a class about creativity in South Korea. I think that would be so cool. I mean, obviously K-pop, K-dramas, they're huge now, but I'm going to show my age, but I have been interested in them ever since I was like 11 in middle school. So foresight, I don't know, I'm just going to say yes. Like, what I think has been really commendable is how South Korea has utilized pop culture to really put themselves on the map globally. And like K-pop and K-dramas makes like a huge part of their entire GDP.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like they export a lot of items related to K-pop. Yeah.
I've definitely heard their export, like the Hallyu wave or whatever, is like really, really large.
Yeah. So I think that's a fascinating, I guess, case study for the media industry.
Yeah. Are you thinking do they have a class in South Korea?
The GIPs and GMCs, one of them you take the class first and at Wharton, and then you go to the country and explore, kind of like integrate what you learned there. And then there's the other one is like where you go and like take the classes in the country. I'm not sure which ones the China and the Korea ones are, but those are the two that I am considering.
Nice.
Yeah.
It sounds like it'll be fun.
Trips are fun, but they're also stressful. And so stories come out of these trips, you know? I personally have had a very chill time with my trips. I think I've been very lucky in that my Poconos house, which I guess is like the first tradition at Wharton, it's like after preterm, you like get to meet a few people, like you meet everybody in your cluster, in your cohort, and then you meet like some other folks in your cluster and whatnot. And then right after preterm, it's Labor Day weekend. So then we all go into the Poconos Mountains. That's like 2 hours away from campus. And yeah, everybody organizes their own houses and everything. Each house is about 20 people or so. And like you go do different activities with people in your house. And like you're not going to know everybody in your house because they're like typically people that are like friends of friends that all live together. But it's a fantastic time. I love everybody in my Poconos house. I've heard stories from other people that have said otherwise. And also stories from other trips. My other international trips, like I went to Turkey for Opportunity Week, and that was so chill. It was just me and 2 other people, so very low key. We were very nimble. It was really fun, but I have heard stories where there were cases of people mismanaging money, of not booking things, and just like general drama. What about you?
I'd say like maybe I haven't traveled as much, so I don't have as much like tea or gossip. I'd say that there were some incidents on trips like in field last year, or I guess earlier this year, either with like dealing with local law enforcement or maybe just generally like how people were deciding who they would room with in these places. I generally think that even in most cases, most business school students are pretty mature.
Yeah.
They're like older. There might be some who still find it a little hard to be completely mature, and obviously with so many different types of people, it's a little hard for everyone to get along. But I'd say that in general, if you stick this many people in close proximity, disagreements or drama are bound to happen. But at least I've been lucky that a lot of the friends I've been with or have hung out with are generally like really, it's like really fun trips and a great way to get close to people who have pretty similar like professional interests and values that I share.
That's true. That's true. You would hope that because we're all in our mid-late 20s / early 30s, everybody is like very mature. But I feel like everybody going back into an academic setting, like you kind of go back to like a college mindset in some ways.
Yeah, maybe. I think, especially since many of the people who are entering business school have been working so hard previously that when they come to school they want to blow off some steam. But it's interesting because I think in more recent times, because there's a slightly different demographic of student that's coming in who are coming in from more engineering backgrounds, who have a slightly correlate with a slightly different personality, or are deciding to come here to build a startup and therefore have a little bit more of like a focused use on the resources that they have at HBS. It's like slightly changing the culture. I think it's like many more different types of people like you can find in your free time while you're interested in the right group of people to hang out with.
Oh, speaking of, how extroverted would you say Harvard Business School is in general?
Yeah, good question. I'd say, so I thought I was extroverted prior to business school, and then I came to business school, and I was like, wow, I definitely am not as extroverted as I thought.
Really? Because you're pretty darn extroverted.
Yeah, maybe part of it is just like, there's so many people in class that, because you're only looking at the general broad view, maybe each individual person is, let's say, a similar level, because you're constantly seeing people talking, it feels like, as a whole, the class is very extroverted. I also think there's something to say about like if you aren't getting enough sleep or you don't have enough energy, you feel less extroverted than other people, and maybe it's just a question of like, I'm not sleeping enough because I'm doing all of these activities. But yeah, I'd say that, especially since a lot of these people are coming from like, let's say, undergraduate degrees that skew a little bit more social, for example, like business or finance, or people are coming in and they know that they're coming here to make the sorts of connections that they can work with in the future. I think that people are generally pretty extroverted, but I will say there's also a large portion of people that are quite introverted that after classes will like need to take some time to recharge. They're great conversationally, like one-to-one, but I think it's just like the constant activity and talking that does drain people a little bit.
I agree with that. I will also add on that I think sociableness is also another skill that you can work on. And I noticed that because when I first moved to Philadelphia, we had pre-term activities basically every single night. And I would go to each one of those because, I wanted to meet people. This was like right after I had spent like time just by myself after I quit my job. And I was very burnt out after, say, like 3 nights of social activities in a row. But again, Wharton is a very extroverted school, and I've had to kind of exercise that muscle by going to events every night. And it's not like partying or clubbing every single night, but just events in general. Like it could be like to a dinner reservation with friends, or it could be to a speaker series hosted by the school, etc. And I was able to build some more stamina throughout the semester.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. It is a muscle that needs to be worked out, especially if you were working a job that was relatively not social beforehand or was like pretty individual. It definitely takes some time to get used to at the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. One question is from the audience. He wants to know about dating in business school.
I'd say it's interesting because I think my conception, or many people's conception, was that like people come to business school and a lot of people are trying to find a relationship or are coming in single. I think my section was very married and or in like engaged or in long-term relationships or just very like deep relationships. So I think people come in and they expect a certain level and they're like, wow, maybe within this community it's a little tough. Not to say that it doesn't happen. I think my section, for example, was pretty unique in the sense that the year above us had 6 couples that were from the section, which is like a really large percentage of the section in terms of people. My year, in my section, like just my section alone, had 0 couples. So it was like completely skewed the other way. And there's definitely some other sections which have these either within the section couples or people who are across the sections. But I think that in general, there obviously is a level of dating. You have so many people who are like relatively well-to-do in their career, pretty well off, and have both the money, time, and the social ability to start a relationship. I think that obviously there are other schools within the Boston ecosystem, and I think that just makes it even easier for a lot of students who are in school. But I think a large number of people also come in and they're like so focused on their career that this side is maybe like a bit of second part to them. So I think it also just depends on like the age of people.
That's true.
Who come in and they're just like their own personality. But I think there's definitely a large level of dating, and I wasn't as involved with it in the first year. So I would hear stories from friends. But I think if you are interested in meeting people, it's like a great way to meet people from a variety of backgrounds.
I would also echo that. Wharton, a significant percentage of the people are in relationships. So in my cohort, we also have a lot of people that are like married. But do you guys have a thing called the turkey drop?
Yes, it is a very colloquial term. I don't know how official it is, but yeah.
Like, people would drop that terminology all over the place at Wharton. And I have witnessed quite a few couples break up around Thanksgiving time. But I think that's just like a factor of, long distance, and if the couple is gonna make it through the 2 years of business school, like they would be like strong anyways. So like the couples that don't make it through, they probably already have some sort of like underlying tension. So like business school just kind of sped up that process. But yeah, no, it's really interesting how people act in terms of the dating scene in business school. I have a lot of girlfriends and guy friends who are adamant about not wanting to date within Wharton because they don't want to date another person in their section or in their class year. Do you feel like that's the same at Harvard?
I think it's maybe people are hesitant to date within their section just because they feel like that their section community is so close they don't want to mess it up. I think within the years, definitely more common, and people are generally open to it. Some people might not want to, but I think many people are just like, hey, people are pretty straightforward, and they know if anything happens, hey, just be civil. There's also sometimes dating between the years, and I just think that a lot of people see this as a nice time because they don't have, let's say if they're doing IB or something beforehand, they have the time to be able to think about their own life. So I think that's one pretty good thing, people have the time and the energy.
Yeah. And then there's people at business school are so resourceful, and they're quite entrepreneurial too, obviously. And so I think our class has been especially vocal about providing opportunities to the singles. So we have a singles chat, and allegedly, it wasn't really active for the year before us, but as soon as our class hit, the singles chat started popping off. There were a bunch of singles events, little mixers, and then our pub club, which is just a club that was pretty big, before my year at the very least. It was people just go to the pub on Thursdays to just mingle, chat with friends. Pub this year has been doing a lot of collaborations with other clubs or themed events, and so one of the things was a singles pub where people just basically pitched their friends. And in true business school / consulting style, people would make a 1-slide deck for their friends to pitch and then go up stage and pitch their friends. And so every person that was being pitched had their own slide. But yeah, no, I just thought it was hilarious that this is what people at business school would do to help pitch their friends. But you also mentioned that there was similar events at Harvard.
Yeah, there was one that we had which was similar to a pitch event. I think it was in the first semester, if not Valentine's Day. But it was really nice because many people who are either single or in relationships would pitch their single friends. It would be generally 2 or 3 sections would come together and then they could pitch their section mate to another section. Yeah, so that was a pretty nice event. And then there was one event we had, which was called Meat Market, MWET Meat Market. But it was just,
not the MEAT.
Yeah. But it's a nice way, similar to y'all's pub club. You could meet people at this event, and generally you knew that other than some people who were wingmen and wingwomen, people there were single. So it was a great way to meet people as well.
These are very tame answers. Comment below what you want to know or how much you love hearing Oishik's experiences if you want us to dive into more spicy topics. Okay, then to wrap it up, can you share your biggest lessons at HBS and also any advice to applicants?
Yeah, I'd say my biggest lessons would be prior to business school, I considered what if I just continue in my career or do my own startup or I had another job offer. I think I came in wanting exposure and to understand what is even possible, and I think that it's really hard to know what is out there without being in school, and I think a lot of people in the industry are much more willing to give you their time and their energy to explain their goals and how the industry looks to them if you're a student. So I'd say that's one thing. My biggest lesson from HBS is it's a great way to get exposure and also have many people who are willing to pour time and resources into you, which is very nice. I think they recognize that you are trying to grow and you're trying to have some humility and be look, I don't know everything, please teach me. And then in terms of advice that I would give, I would say once you come into school, maybe have that level of humility. Obviously trust your confidence and you came here for a reason, but take the time to just cold email people and figure out, hey, this area that I maybe had very little exposure to, tell me a little bit about it. Is this something that I can see myself doing? And I think many people who are like my friends who are dropping out from school to do startups, like it's great you were able to get what you want, but we aren't in school just for like the next few years. Like hopefully these are lessons that we are learning for the rest of our lives. And that's why sometimes like I try to pay extra attention in class, because I'm like, I don't know how much of this I'll remember, but I hope I remember a fair amount, because who knows, maybe 10, 15 years I'm dealing with like a decision and school would have helped me there.
Definitely, yeah. Utilize that .edu email because people are so much more receptive to answering students than a working professional. I would also add to the point about your takeaways from school. I feel like I went into business school really wanting to meet people, because people are here from all sorts of incredible backgrounds, are going to go on to do amazing stuff. And so for me, one of my goals is to, one, meet as many people as possible, and two, like form as many deep connections as possible. And so I'm hoping that when I leave business school, like a few years down the road, that I'll still maintain those relationships with those people.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a great place to meet the sorts of people who, like, if you know you have similar values, like it's a great way to get exposure to these sorts of people.
Exactly. Okay, well, thank you, Oishik, so much for your time. I really enjoyed just chatting about the differences at HBS and Wharton. And I hope that you guys enjoy learning more about the differences between our two schools as well. If you want to know more, then just drop a comment and subscribe to my channel, Irina_IRL. And also let me know what else you want us to talk about. Bye!